Global trade is complicated, and governing it can be even more complex. To get a better understanding of the World Trade Organization and some of the issues that it's facing, we talked to Anna Ashton, who's the Director of Business Advisory Services here at the U.S.-China Business Council. So what is the WTO?
So the WTO, or the World Trade Organization, is essentially the governing institution for global trade today. And it evolved from the 1947 General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which was one of a number of post-World War II agreements that were reached in order to create both rules and also forums for the international community of nations to resolve disputes and to be able to operate more effectively with each other. The idea behind the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade was that economic prosperity is an essential need for every nation. And prior to World War II, sort of after World War I and during the Great Depression, there were a lot of really sort of nationalist trade practices that many nations engaged in, where there was retribution and protectionism, and global trade was reduced by like 2/3 during that time. There was a lot of unemployment, and this was thought to have been a major contributor to the onset of war. So with the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which later became the WTO, the idea was that this would create both a set of rules and a body for resolving disputes that would allow nations to all achieve economic prosperity and not have to pilfer each other. And that that kind of ensured global economic prosperity would better protect peace and security.
Okay. So the Trump administration seems to have a pretty low opinion of the WTO. What are their reasonings behind that?
The Trump administration essentially views the WTO as bad, yes. And they have three major reasons why they feel that way. The first is that they think it's unfair to the U.S., it impedes U.S. sovereignty. The second is that they think that the dispute settlement process at the WTO is too slow, and that even if you win a dispute settlement, the chances that the victory will be implemented, that the measures the other country is told to take in order to come back into compliance with the WTO agreement, the chances that that will happen are not acceptably high. You know, there's no guarantee. And then the third big reason why they don't like the WTO is that it's out of date. To a large extent, their complaints about the WTO are right. I would say their complaint that it's unfair and impedes U.S. sovereignty is the weakest of their complaints. But on the other hand, their complaint that it's too slow and that there aren't enough guarantees of implementation of orders is pretty fair. And then the complaint that it's out of date is definitely fair.
Okay, so what is the U.S. trying to do to fix these issues? Are there any efforts that they're doing to remedy these problems?
So there are nations that are trying to essentially update the WTO and make it work better. The U.S. isn't really in that camp right now. Under the Trump administration, the U.S. is actually kind of challenging the continued relevance of the World Trade Organization, and it's doing it in two key ways. The first is with the use of the Section 232 tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum, and the second is with the U.S.'s continued, decision not to approve appointments to the WTO's appellate body. And I can kind of break both of those down for you. So the 232 tariffs have to do with protecting national security. And under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, so domestic U.S. law, the president has the right to impose tariffs on imports if he thinks that those particular imports somehow impede, undermine, or weaken U.S. national security interests. Early in the Trump administration, the president made the determination that steel and aluminum imports undermine U.S. national security interests because they threaten the continued stability or prosperity of our own domestic steel and aluminum industry. And if we don't have a strong domestic steel and aluminum industry, then we don't have a guaranteed ability to meet defense requirements for steel and aluminum. The other thing the Trump administration is doing right now that undermines the legitimacy of the WTO or the effectiveness of the WTO is refusing to approve appointments to the appellate body. So in the WTO, if you have a disagreement about the trading practices of another nation and you lose, the dispute settlement panel finds against you, then there are recommendations for steps you need to implement in order to come into compliance with the WTO agreement and right your wrong vis-a-vis the other party. But you don't have to take those steps until after you've appealed to the appellate body. So you're supposed to have the right to another hearing by essentially the WTO's higher court. The appellate body has to have a quorum of at least 3 members to hear a case. The United States has alleged that the appellate body is too political, that it's not sticking to the actual words of the agreement, but that it's making determinations with sort of loose interpretations or liberal interpretations of what the rules ought to mean, and that it's fighting against the United States in unfair ways. So in response to that, the United States has refused to approve appointments of members to the appellate body, and it's done so now to such an extent that there are only 3 remaining members on the appellate body. And at the end of 2019, if the United States continues this practice, there will be fewer than 3. So the appellate body won't be able to hear any disputes. So in this particular case, the Trump administration has sort of created a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're saying that the WTO doesn't work well, and then they're taking actions that ensure it can't function.
So how about other countries? Are other countries trying to offer their own solutions to fix some of these problems?
Yeah, they are. Canada, the European Union, Japan, and a number of other countries have been working hard to come up with proposals that multiple member states have bought into, and to try to fix some of the key problems that most states agree are impeding the WTO from being effective today. The problem with all of these efforts is that in order for them to work, they're really going to need buy-in from large WTO member nations like the United States and China. And the 2 key areas where they're trying to revise the way that the WTO functions are both areas where either the United States or China is very unlikely to be supportive of the proposed fixes.